Good afternoon to all our guests in India and good morning to our guests from Germany. My name is Meera and I welcome you all to today's webinar where we will discuss the key changes in companies' Auditor's Report Order 2020 and its impact on the financial statements of financial year 2021-22. The last 2 to 3 years have witnessed several regulatory changes. Today, we will focus on one of the most important changes that took place in 2020, both from the industry's point of view as well as from the auditor's point of view. The first one being the amendment to the Schedule 3 to the Companies Act 2013, which is applicable from financial year 2021 onwards. There are a sea of changes in the disclosures that need to be made in the financial statements, and similarly, the MCA, that's the Ministry of Corporate Affairs, has notified companies Auditor's Report Order 2020 on the 25th of February 2020. The order, that's the short form, CARO 2020, replaces the earlier order under Companies Order 2016, and this is applicable from financial year beginning April 2021 onwards. With these enhanced disclosures and reporting, the information available to the stakeholders, including bankers, would be much more than what it used to be. This would help the users of the financial statements to make better decisions. We shall understand the similarities in this reporting as also to some of the key additional disclosures that would be applicable to most of the companies. Our experts for today are Mr. Vinay KS and Mr. G.N. Ramaswamy, both partners in the Assurance Department of ASA and Associates LLP. Vinay has over 16 years of experience in auditing and accounting consultancy services and specializes in corporate audit services, risk assessment, internal audit, systems review, and JSOX. He has also worked in Dubai and deals with numerous multinational companies carrying out internal audits and system reviews with special focus on internal control studies in various sectors like healthcare, automotive, hospitality, manufacturing services, and software. Vinay completed his BCom from Bangalore University and Chartered Accountancy from the Institute of Chartered Accountants of India. G.N. Ramaswamy has over 28 years of experience in audit and advisory servicing large and medium-sized clients on statutory audit encompassing financial reporting standards and strategies for governance and restructuring. A fellow member of ICAI, Ramaswamy is an information system auditor and holds post-qualification certificates of ICAI in international financial reporting standards and international taxation. He is a registered insolvency professional and a registered valuer for securities and financial assets. He is also the secretary of the Social Society of Auditors, one of the oldest accounting bodies in India. A very warm welcome to both of you. Moving ahead with the agenda, once our experts have made their address, we will open the floor for your queries. You can already post queries in the chat box on the right-hand side of your screens. Kindly post clear queries so we can give you the best possible guidance. Lastly, do review your membership status with the Chamber and get in touch with us for any queries regarding the same. If you are an active member of the Chamber, it helps us stay well connected with you. Also, please stay tuned into our website, our social media pages for webinar details and other member engagements. Thank you very much for your cooperation. And now, Ramaswamy, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Meera. Good afternoon, all the participants. I take this opportunity to thank Indo-German Chamber of Commerce for providing us an opportunity to present the changes in Schedule 3 as well as CARO 2020. Can you move to the next slide, please? So, to begin with, we will start with changes made in Schedule 3. As you are aware, Schedule 3 has 3 parts: Division 1, Division 2, Division 3. Division 1 it talks about the presentation format for IGAP companies, the companies who follows IGAP, and Division 2 is for India's companies, and Division 3 is for NBFCs. Today, in our discussion, we confine our talk only to the Division 1 and Division 2 because I have heard that the participants today are from manufacturing and service industry, and there may not be much participation from NBFC sector. So we are not focusing more on NBFC. I would like to say that most of the changes made in the Schedule 3 amendment is applicable both for Division 1 and Division 2. Almost identical changes, barring 1 or 2 to comply with India's requirements. Otherwise, most of the changes are identical. So whatever changes we are discussing will be common for both, unless we physically highlight certain changes for India's companies. To begin with, I would like to state that there are around 35 changes made in IGAP Schedule 3, that Division 1, of which around 10 are cosmetic in nature. In Division 2, there are around 38 changes made by the government, of which around 11 to 12 are cosmetic in nature. Cosmetic in the sense that they have changed the nomenclature, they would have changed where it has been grouped, and certain cosmetic corrections to align with the standards or statutes. It is not difficult to comply with, but other changes are a bit elaborate. We'll be discussing the important ones in the slides to come. We'll be sharing the presentation. So to have more effective, myself and Vinay will be discussing the slides in alternate manner so that it will be better for the audience also. Next slide, please. The Schedule 3 is applicable from 1/4/2021 financial year. So the first financial year will be 31st March 2022 accounts. All the companies who are preparing the financial statements on or after 1/4/2021, the financial starting date and ending on 31st March 2022, need to comply with the revised Schedule 3. So all the changes need to be considered in the notes. Most of the changes in the notes have relevance in the audit report also. So some of the information now brought into the notes were earlier given by listed companies as a part of the director's report or some other places in the annual report. But to have a better readability, the government has introduced these changes directly into the notes of accounts so that the onus will be on the management to collect and produce information in a single place. The readers also will be benefited to assess all the information in a single place while reviewing the financial statement itself. So we will be covering the presentation in 4 parts. First one is changes in balance sheet. Then we'll discuss about the additional disclosures requirement for the balance sheet items. Then we'll talk about a few changes in profit and loss account and other disclosures. This is the way we structured our Schedule 3 presentation. Then we'll talk about the changes made in CARO. And finally, we'll come to question and answer section. This is the way we have structured today's session. Next slide, please. Excuse me, next slide, please. Yeah, next one. We'll talk with the changes made in balance sheet. Over to Vinay to discuss about the changes made in share capital.
Thanks, Ram, for setting the stage. And good afternoon to all my Indian friends and good morning to the German friends as well. First of all, even before we start getting into the nitty-gritties of the key changes in the Schedule 3, let us quickly understand. I'll not take more than a minute to talk about the background as to why these key changes have come all of a sudden, especially in the Schedule 3 and the CARO 2020. In the last few years, we have been witnessing a lot of a spike in the cases of fraud, corporate frauds, financial misreporting, and so on, mainly by way of siphoning off of funds, misappropriation of inventories, and so on. So obviously, the expectation of the regulators are enhanced, and there was a need felt to actually improve the reporting structures, and also at the same time, as an auditor, the auditor's reports also need to be more stringent. So with this background, the CARO 2020 was actually first drafted, but then some of the stakeholders actually approached the MCA and said, it can't be just the auditors, even the financial statements from the management side, even the companies need to disclose the relevant information. And hence, if you look at most of these changes, they're going to be parallel reporting. Both the management will be reporting, disclosing certain facts in the financial statements, and at the same time, you would also see that auditors are also going to report on such matters in their audit report. That is the CARO 2020. So with this, we go on to the first component, that is the share capital. Pretty simple. Until last year, previously it was only the shareholding beyond 5%. More than 5% was what was reported. But going forward, from this year onwards, what also needs to be reported is the promoter's shareholding, which was never there. So promoter shareholding in the company needs to be disclosed. the number of shares, the percentage of shares, also the change in the shareholding during the year also needs to be disclosed. So who's a promoter? It is as per the definition of the Companies Act. So we just need to follow that. And this is the only major change in the share capital. And as we mentioned, we are not covering all the changes recommended by the Schedule 3. Only the key ones are what we are going to address in today's session. With that, we move on to the next component. Next slide.
Yeah. The next one is regarding the changes in trade payable. As we are aware, till 31/3/2021, we used to give the disclosure in the balance sheet that amounts due to micro and small enterprises and due to other under trade payables head. And we will be giving details in the notes, the breakup, and also we have to give some additional disclosures as required by MSMED Act, namely the principal amount outstanding, what is the interest accrued and due on the above amount outstanding, payment made to the supplier, interest paid to the supplier, then interest due and payable to the supplier on amount already paid, and interest accrued and due on amount still pending. These are the some disclosures we need to give as part of our MSMED Act disclosure requirements, which we used to give in the notes on accounts. In addition, the companies will be filing a form annually, MSME 1, with the regulator to furnish all this information, so that those information and the notes will be correlated. If there is a discrepancy, they will be seeking further details to ensure the compliance. Now, this act, this disclosure requirement has been amended further. Can you go to the next slide, please? Now, in addition, we have to give as a part of our notes on accounts the outstanding, aging outstanding, less than 1 year, 1 to 2 years, 2 to 3 years, and more than 3 years, and total. And now they are given a classification of MSME, others, disputed dues to MSME, and a dispute due to others. I would highlight one point here. Till now, we used to give the Schedule 3, the main phase of balance sheet is not yet changed. There we are giving only amount due to micro and small enterprises and others. Now here they have given an abbreviation MSME. MSME includes medium also, but definitely before the year end they will make the clarification and the correction in this format. Otherwise, there will be confusion between the main balance sheet and the notes on accounts, which is not the intention of the government. This is once you give this, if any outstanding is more than a year, obviously there will be interest element on any amount due to MSME, so that we need to be careful in giving the disclosures to collect the information properly, so that there is no disconnect in the information given in the face of the balance sheet as well as in the notes on the MSME return being filed. Next slide, please.
Yeah. So pretty similar to the trade payables disclosure. The disclosure under trade receivables is also quite exhaustive and significant and very important. If we move on to the next slide, we have the format. The next slide, yeah. So this is something that is significant improvement or disclosure requirement, I would say, because until last year, the only disclosure that was required was less than 6 months due and more than 6 months due. But now the aging bucket doesn't stop there. We also need to give 1 to 2 years, 2 to 3 years, and more than 3 years. Not just that, the receivable balances have to be bifurcated between the undisputed receivables considered good, undisputed receivables considered doubtful, disputed receivables considered good, disputed receivables considered doubtful. So much of information needs to be disclosed. On top of that, the most important, I would say, is on the unbilled dues. So if a company has any unbilled receivables, let's say you have accrued income, but you have not billed it to your customer, even those dues will have to be separately disclosed. The reason for such disclosures is definitely because there's a possibility that companies may be accruing the income, but ultimately doesn't get billed. To identify all those non-movement kind of billable items, this particular requirement is being given. And also, if you look at the disputed balances, the disputed trade receivables which are considered doubtful, definitely from the audit standpoint, the way we look, we would definitely ask, if it is disputed and if it is doubtful, why don't you make a provision? So these are some of the practical aspects. By looking at the new disclosures, I mean, as an auditor, we would definitely tend to think or tend to ask certain questions, which definitely would completely change the way in which the audit was earlier done. So a lot of questions would definitely be asked just by way of looking into the information that is being disclosed. So the similar disclosure is also this particular table that is shown on the slide is for the Indian GAAP companies which follow the Indian GAAP. If we move to the next slide, we have a very similar disclosure which is for the companies following Ind AS. So pretty similar. The aging bucket needs to be disclosed, and also if you look at the breakdown, The only addition here is between balances which are credit impaired. So this is for Ind-AS companies. So besides this, the disclosure is more or less the same. So this is one of the key changes I would say in this Schedule 3 disclosure. And with this, we move on to the next component.
Yeah, this is regarding the changes made in the property, plant and equipment. In the old Schedule 3, the heading was tangible assets, though the standards have been amended to PPE to align with the international standards. But the Schedule 3 as well, Schedule 3 was not amended. Now, by this amendment series, they have changed that nomenclature. As you are aware, in the fixed schedule, that is PPE schedule, we used to give the opening balance, additions, deletions, and we'll give a closing balance of the cost. Similarly, for depreciation, we'll give what is the opening balance, what is the depreciation for the year, what is the depreciation withdrawal, and what is the closing balance. And we'll give the WDV as at the year end, along with the comparatives for the previous year for all these line items what you have given. Now, in the amendment, along with making the changes of the name to PPE, the government has also proposed one more additional requirement, that is any revaluation of assets. If it exceeds 10% of the total value of the book value of any class of assets. So, as you are aware, the class of assets means the building, plant and machinery, vehicles, or furniture fittings. These are all the different class of assets. If the revaluation of is exceeds 10% of any class of assets, then we need to give the further details in the PPE schedule, that is depreciation schedule. And this has been corrected for Division 1. Schedule 3, so that it is aligned with the accounting standards, and also it is aligned with the international accounting standards. Next one, please. Can you please move to the next slide? No, previous one, sorry. It has come.
Yes.
Yeah, previous one. Perfect. So the next change is regarding the borrowing from banks and financial institutions. Whenever there is a company has borrowed any amount from banks and financial institutions which has not been used for the purpose it has been, I think you have to go to the next slide. To the purpose for which it has been availed, the company need to give that information in the balance sheet along with the details and how it has been utilized. This is a new insertion. This is to avoid any diversion of funds by availing a public finance. So the banks are monitoring whether the funds have been utilized only for the purpose for which it has been availed. If in case of any deviation, now the management while preparing the financial accounts need to give the details as a part of the financial statements. So this is one of the important change brought in by Schedule 3. So we need to comply and ensure that it has been complied with.
I think GNR, on this particular point, I think even earlier, I think there was a reporting under CARO, but now I think the regulator wants the companies to actually disclose the fact themselves. So that's the key change. This particular requirement, as auditors, we used to report this in the CARO, but now what the regulator wants is the companies have to voluntarily disclose if the funds have not been used for the purpose for which they have been borrowed.
And one more thing, the next change is regarding, as you're aware, the board has to give an assertion in the financial statement that all the assets other than the fixed assets and investment, non-current investments will be realized to the value what is stated in the financial statements. But now the momentum is gaining for intangible assets, so they added the intangible also in this purview. So now, if in the opinion of the board, all the assets other than fixed assets and the intangible assets and also non-current investments, if it will fetch less than the value what is stated in the financial statement, they need to give the fact as a part of the notes. Next one. With this, we are completing the balance sheets and we'll go to the additional regulatory information. I request Vinay to touch upon the changes made in PPE and the capital working progress.
Yeah, so in this slide, we have two aspects. One is on the PPE, that is property, plant and equipment and intangible assets, where we talk specifically about the immobile properties where the title deed is held by a person other than the company. And the second clause is with respect to the revaluation of the PPE. So we'll first come to the second point. We'll talk about the revaluation part of it, and then we'll go to the title deed aspect. So any company which gets its property, plant and equipment revalued will have to disclose if such valuation is done by a registered valuer. So that's important. That's a key change again. So disclosure has to be done if the valuation is done by a registered valuer, and it has to be given on as a note in the financial statements. Similarly, as an auditor also in his CARO report needs to note the similar facts and state if the same has been done by a registered valuer or not. moving on to the next slide, where we discuss in detail about the title deed of property, plant and equipment and intangible assets. It is pretty common in some of the companies, especially group companies or promoter-held companies, that the immobile properties, especially the title deeds, could not be in the name of the company. So for whatever reason. So what the regulator wants us to disclose is that all those property, plant and equipments and the intangible assets where the properties are not registered, the title deeds are not held in the name of the company, have to be disclosed in this particular format. Each and every item has to be listed out. The description of the property needs to be given. The value of the properties needs to be given. Title deeds is in whose name, that needs to be mentioned. And relationship with that person who's actually holding the title deed also needs to be given. Whether it's a promoter, director, relative, could be a related group company or whoever. So the relation with that particular party needs to be given. At the same time, the property has been held since which date also needs to be given. And the reason why such title is not in the name of the company also needs to be given. So this is again a completely new change in the way in which disclosure is given. Earlier, there was no such requirement, but this is definitely a key change again from the disclosure perspective. Moving on to the next slide. Again, something that was not expected, but this is again a surprise disclosure, because there were a lot of companies. I mean, this particular clause is going to address both the companies which are into CWIP, that is the capital work in progress, as well as the intangible assets under development. That could be the technology companies or the software companies who develop products, and at the same time CWIP for the manufacturing companies or companies which are into projects and so on. So what the requirement says is that, again, even aging of all of these projects, be it CWIP or IWIP, that is intangible assets work in progress, given aging of whatever is less than 1 year, 1 to 2, 2 to 3, and more than 3. What is the reason why this particular requirement is? Because it was observed that some companies actually accumulated the costs that are spent on such projects, which they tend to call it as work in progress, and they used to park it there for like ever. Those projects never saw the light at the end of the day, and they just used to be accumulated there, and that will not get charged off to the P&L as well. To curb such practices and also to bring it to light, what the requirement says is that disclose the aging, one. At the same time, also disclose what is the status of the progress of such projects. What is the progress? Is it suspended? Not just that, a lot of qualitative information is also required. That is the project overdue? Is it time overrun, or is it a cost overrun? What is the reason? And which are the projects which have been suspended shall also be given in detail. So this is again a completely new requirement. Never was it in the previous. I mean, previously in the last so many years was such requirement there for the disclosure. So this is something which would also raise eyebrows, and also from the user of the financial statement or from the auditor's standpoint, the way people would start to look at such things would definitely change. I mean, if there is a possibility of, there is an indication that certain projects actually need to be written off from the books, that will be there. And I think this is the right time for companies who have actually accumulated such CWIP where the projects are stalled, there's no progress, and they don't see any such, I mean, they don't think that this is going to be completed, or these are expenses which are like sunk costs, where they don't find any value in future. They may have to clean this up from their financial statements. So this is the time. Next year, all of this will have to be disclosed. With that, we move on to the next slide.
Yeah, this is regarding the changes made with respect to loans and advances given to directors or promoters or KMPs. As you are aware, whenever there is a loan given to directors or related parties, which are repayable on a specific period as per the terms and conditions, then there is no issue. If it is repayable on demand or without specifying any terms, then the company need to disclose the details as per the tabulation given in the Schedule 3. And that is amount paid to borrower, promoters, directors, KMPs, related parties, and what is the amount that is outstanding at the year end, along with the percentage of the total loans and advances. So this is the most important thing. We need to, on seeing this, everybody will know what is the total percentage of the total advances has been given to the related parties. As you are aware, in the editorial regime, the auditors need to comment as a part of the CARO report that what is the compliance of section 185 and 186. In case of any deviation or non-compliance, they used to report in the CARO. And the company used to give as a part of the financial statements the disclosure as required in the accounting standards to related parties, the amounts outstanding, amounts paid or received from the related parties, and what is the amount outstanding in the year. These are the information. But now, in addition to that, if any amount has been paid without any stipulation or which are repaid on demand, they have to give these additional details with a percentage of the total advances. So we need to be careful whenever there is a payment to a related party, whether the provisions of the Companies Act has been complied with. Next one, please. This is regarding a new addition on willful defaulter. As you are aware, actually there are a lot of NPAs cropping up in the recent past, and post-COVID, there is liquidity is also affected for most of the companies. So the banks also very rigorous in collecting the old dues to avoid any slippages to NPA. If the slippage is genuine, there is no issue. But if the slippage is willful and due to diversion of funds to any sister concerns or related parties, then the bank will categorize those borrowers as a willful defaulter as per the guidelines prescribed by Reserve Bank of India. If the entity for which we are talking about is categorized as a willful defaulter by the bank or by Reserve Bank of India, then the company need to disclose the date of declaration as a willful defaulter and the amount of details of default, by way of amount and nature of default. What is the period of installment has been skipped, what is the amount outstanding, what is the interest unpaid, and along with the date. So we need to be careful whenever there is a slippage. As the auditor on the part, whenever there is a overdue, they need to check in the public domain whether the particular company has been classified as willful defaulter, because this onus is on the company to disclose in the notes, and the auditor need to confirm in the report. But the primary responsibility is on the company to disclose the details. So we need to be careful on this. Next one, please. This year they have made a drastic change to give certain key ratios in the financial statements. Till last year, the directors of certain listed companies used to give certain key ratios as a part of the data report or elsewhere in the annual report. But there is no mandatory requirement to give all the ratios as a part of the annual report of financial statement. Now, the government has brought in certain key ratios as detailed below: the current ratio, debt equity ratio, debt service coverage ratio, return on capital equity ratio, inventory turnover ratio, trade receivables turnover ratio, trade payables turnover ratio, net capital turnover ratio, net profit ratio, return on capital, return on investment. Everything is connected to the liquidity of the company. These ratios are very relevant and this to be disclosed. But one more important change is whenever there is a variance of more than 25% as compared to the preceding year, either it can be positive or negative. Even if there is growth or improvement, then also we need to give the details with the justification. So there must be a note explaining the reason for that variance of more than 28% and with the proper justification. We can't put the 28% is a percentage of change. That is not sufficient. We have to give why this 28% has come and how it is being justified. This is a requirement of the company. So it is better for all the companies to compare the trend with the past results. 21 would have been over now, so they can compare with 20 and 19 to see how the trend, what is the ratios, how it is being reflected for the last 3 years, to see whether there is any trend or whether it is increasing or decreasing as compared to how they can justify, so that they'll be well prepared when they reach 31/3/2022. Because the time limit post 31/3/2022, the audit accounts will be very limited, so they need to collate all this information really in advance so that they can be prepared and give a proper note in the financial statements. Next one. Vinay, this is regarding the rounding off. Can you just touch upon this?
Yeah. And just before we move to this slide, I think on the previous slide, I would like to add a couple of points. These are also ratios which could indicate if there's a doubt on the going concern. That's also, these are some of the indicators. So this is one of the primary reasons why this particular thing has been included. And another thing is the company also needs to disclose what are the components of the numerator and the denominator while they calculate the ratios. And this has to be uniformly followed, applied over the years. I mean, we can't, for convenience sake, keep changing the denominator or the numerator. There has to be some consistency in this particular method. Moving on to the next slide. So this is again another change. Until last year, it was only a voluntary requirement. I mean, in case voluntarily the companies wanted to disclose their financial statements, they could round it off, and it was mandatory only for the companies following Ind AS. But starting this year, based on the total income of the company, which is going to be the criteria, they would have to mandatorily round off the financial statements. Not just the balance sheet, P&L, cash flow, it will be the notes to accounts and all the other disclosures also. Wherever you're disclosing any numbers, it will have to be rounded off. And it depends on if you're total income is less than 100 crores, the nearest hundreds, thousands, and so on. If your total income is more than 100 crores, it will be to the nearest lakhs, millions, and so on. Again, uniformity has to be maintained throughout the financial statement. Balance sheet and P&L, you can't say that I will follow in millions and then in notes to accounts you move to lakhs or thousands. So you have to maintain uniformity across through the financial statements. With this, we move to the next slide. This is again a very important disclosure, I would say, because undisclosed income. This is something where companies have not recorded this as income previously, but during the course of an income tax assessment, if you tend to disclose or surrender certain income and offer it for taxes, then those incomes will have to be disclosed, and we'll have to state whether such income have been previously recorded or not recorded, and we'll have to accordingly record this in the year in which such a disclosure or this thing has happened. And the only exception to not disclose this would be when the regulator is actually giving an immunity. For example, there was this income tax had given this voluntary disclosure of income scheme, wherein there was immunity given by the regulation itself, saying that you may disclose, you can show it, but your identity would not be this thing, and you don't have to show it anywhere else. So that is one exception where if the regulator himself is giving the immunity, you don't have to disclose this as part of the financial statements. If not, any income that is not offered. So let us also talk of expenses which are disallowed. That won't come under this particular clause. Only incomes which are in the nature of revenue, which have not been recognized previously, would have to be disclosed here. Again, a similar parallel reporting is there under CARO. As auditors, auditors would have to go through the assessment orders and see if there's any such income which was missed or which was not accounted previously, and give relevant comments on the same. Moving on to the next point and the next slide also, that is on CSR, where we have explained it in detail. A lot of noise has been made on the CSR front. CSR policies have changed, and we had a lot of amendments coming through, and the amount of disclosures. I mean, again, the background here is it was felt by the regulator that a lot of companies are non-compliant. So earlier it was comply or explain, but now you have to you have to compulsorily disclose all of this, and the disclosures are such that right from the amount that is supposed to be spent, what is the amount required to be spent as per the provisions, how much of amount is incurred, what is the shortfall in the current year, and cumulative shortfalls of all the previous years, reason for the shortfalls need to be given, nature of CSR activities that the company has taken up, and also if CSR activities are taken up with a trust or an NGO or any other entity which are actually related parties, those CSR activities also have to be specifically disclosed. And again, another thing is a lot of companies have actually got notices in the previous years for not disclosing such CSR expenses or not meeting those expenses. And also, it is very pertinent to note that any such unspent amount, ideally, will obviously the carry forward of such all shortfalls will have to be met in future years. And also, if it is not spent within a particular period, it will have the amount, said amount will have to be transferred to an account which will be monitored by the government, and it will be spent accordingly. So this is again a key development in the CSR. Companies will have to keep a track of all of this, right from the shortfalls and previous year shortfalls and so on. Moving on to the next slide.
Yeah. So this is regarding certain other changes made in Schedule 3. The first one is regarding Benami Transactions Prohibition Act. As you're aware, this act is in force from 1988, but gained momentum in the recent years due to diversion of funds. A lot of accounts slipping into NPAs. The funds of the company has been diverted to the group companies or to the related parties, because of which the company could not repay the dues to the bankers or financial institutions. So now this act has gained momentum. If the company has been any proceeding has been initiated against the company under this statute, then they need to give the details of such property, year of acquisition, amount, beneficiaries, any proceedings under law, etc., as a part of their financial statements. The next regarding any borrowing from banks or financial institutions on the basis of security of current assets. Normally, all the companies, all the entities will be availing working capital requirements from banks and financial institutions by pledging the current assets, namely inventory and trade receivables. If so, they need to check whether the quarterly returns filed with the banker for arriving at the drawing power. is in line with the books of account. There should not be any statement which is filed only for getting additional finance, which is not duly reflected in the books of account or physical stock. A few companies will do resort to the practice to get additional funds to meet their emergency cash requirements. If there is any variance, then they need to reconcile the total amount and give the reasons of material discrepancies, and it has to be adequately disclosed. This is one of the important change, because see, it is we are going to do the audit and preparation of accounts as a post-mortem exercise as the year end post 2022. But you would have given the statements. Some companies need to give the statements on a monthly basis. Some companies need to give the statements on a quarterly basis, depends on the amount involved and as per the terms of the sanction. But when we are reviewing the position as of 31st March 2022, things would have happened. You would have filed the statement for September, June quarter, September quarter, December quarter, and March quarter, and we will be doing the audit in the month of May or June or September, depends on the type of the entity. If there is a difference, then nothing can be corrected. So those details to be reviewed, and we need to give a reconciliation and justify why the difference has come. It is an embarrassing question for the company board as well as for the auditors, because and also the income tax department may review it seriously. They may add these differences as part of the addition because it's unexplained. So to better, already we are in the month of July, so to check from June statement onwards to ensure that this is only from the books of account and tallies with the books of accounts or your financial records, whether it's made in Tally or SAP or Oracle, whatever it may be. This is one point. Fortunately, they have not said monthly statements; they have mentioned only quarterly statement. So, and the auditor also has a responsibility to comment on this in the audit report, which we will be covering at a later point. Next one is regarding the layers of companies. As you are aware, few years back, there was a restriction posed by the government that no company can have two subsidiaries in more than 2 layers. So actually, for example, the holding company, company A can have a subsidiary company B. It can have company as another subsidiary company, company C. So the holding company, subsidiary company, and step-down subsidiary. The step-down subsidiary can't invest in another company to have a subsidiary. That is prohibited now. But in spite of this restriction, some companies are still continuing and they are not corrected the hierarchy. For which now, if there is any cases, if your company has any subsidiary which is against the requirement of the layers, then we need to discuss the SIN numbers of the company, relationship of your company with your company, and other details to be disclosed as part of the note, so that the Ministry of Corporate Affairs can get the details upfront and take any corrective action as may be required. The last one is regarding the amount borrowed by the companies. Normally, the companies will borrow funds from various purposes for its working capital or capital requirements. But in addition to that, they may borrow funds for further lending to other parties or to provide guarantees, as the case may be. It can be from Indian entities or it can be from abroad. Either way, if any amount has been borrowed with the intention to give to further investment to other companies or other persons or providing guarantee, then they have to give the details of amount, date, details of the party who has funded you, and the date, amount, and party of the advances to whom you have made the payment. And if any guarantee has been given, the details and date, and any FERMA compliances. Because if there is an inflow of funds from any foreign party, then we need to check whether we are compliant with the FERMA requirements. All these things will form part of your notes. So this is one of the major change that has been brought in by Schedule 3, because most of the companies are now borrowing money for various purposes, either from India or from outside India. And the two, with the prevailing pandemic situation, the borrowings have increased to ensure that there is no that is not affected the running of the company. So we need to be careful whether any fund has been given to any other purpose. Then we need to check whether there is any mistake or non-compliance under this. So with this, we are coming to an end for the major changes in Schedule 3. As we said, we are not touched upon all the 30 changes made therein. A few of the changes are easy to comply with, but these are the changes we collated based on our understanding, based on the discussion we had with our clients and our professional colleagues. These have a very important significance to collate the information from your systems, which has a bearing on the auditors also to give a report to the shareholders. Those things have been collated. So if you have any further queries on any of the Schedule 3 amendment, which you think we need further clarification, you are open to raise the questions which we will be answering during our Q&A session. Next slide, please. Now we are moving to the changes made in CARO 2020. CARO is the domain of auditors, not the domain of the company. We will be reporting based on the details produced to us and based on the information audited by us. We have to give certain comments in our report. As you are aware, the report consists of two parts: the main report and two annexures. One is annexure is for CARO, other annexure is for our IFC, to the entities to which is applied. Caro is mandatory mostly for all the companies except the very small companies to which it's not applicable. This Caro 2020 amendment has been brought in last year. Actually, it was supposed to be effective from 1/4/2020. That is, financial year 2021 is the first year it should have been reported. But due to the pandemic from March 2020 and the time required to collate this information, the government has extended time based on the request from the professions and the companies to 1 more year. So it is applicable from financial year starting on or after 1/4/2021. So 31/3/2022 will be the first year of Caro requirement. The next one, please. The first change which needs support of the client also is regarding inventory. Hitherto, we used to comment on whether the company has a physical verification policy commensurate with the size and nature of the company and whether the differences notice, if any, have been properly dealt with. This is the comment used to give in the Caro. Now, they are going one step further. Along with the existing requirement, they are saying that any discrepancy, if it is more than 10% of each class of inventory, whether the same has been properly dealt with the books of account. Now, the word is each class of inventory. So, you are aware, each class means the company will have a different class of inventory, say raw materials, stores and class, finished goods, purchased goods, whatever may be. If while verifying, if a particular class of asset has a variance of more than 10%, we need to give an assertion that whether it has been properly dealt in the books of account. So this one major change. And the next one regarding the working capital limit. You want to supplement anything, right, on this?
Yeah, I think on the working capital, you can go ahead, Raman.
Yeah. So next thing is regarding the working capital limit. As I said earlier, while I'm talking about the Schedule 3 changes for borrowings from banks or financial institutions by pledging securities of current assets, that is trade receivables inventory, we need to compare with the quarterly stock statement. There it is for all the borrowings. Now, for the auditors, wherever there is a borrowing exceeds 5 crores of the sanction limit by pledging or by giving security of inventory or trade receivables or any other current assets, then they need to verify whether the quarterly statements filed by the company with the banker agrees with the books of account. So the onus on the company to give a statement of fact for all the borrowings, irrespective of amount, even if it's 1 crore, they have to give the note. But the auditor need to check if it exceeds 5 crores of sanction limit. See, you have to see the word sanction limit, not the avail limit. The sanction may be 10 crores. The company would avail only 1 crore at any point of time during the year because they would have taken a higher limit to ensure to meet any additional requirement which they foresee at a different period of time, or it may be cycles. Some companies may require a particular limit during a particular period of the time and it will come down on relation of the task. But normally they will take a limit based on their cash flow requirements. But here the requirements on the auditors to check whether on the sanction limit. So if the sanction limit exceeds 5 crores, we need to check whether the quarterly statement filed by the company, the banker is in line with the books of account. If not, we need to comment on that also.
Next slide, please. Here, just to add on a couple of points, I think the limits that we're talking of would be both fund-based and non-fund based. So even if your LCs and guarantees and all those things will also get covered. So if that exceeds 5 crores, then yes, reporting is required. And the other thing is the auditors need not report if the limits are not secured. If it is unsecured, there is no need for any reporting. At the same time, if the secured assets are not current assets, even then it's not required. So only if it is above 5 crores, the limit is above 5 crores, secured through current assets, then reporting is required. Okay.
Next one. Yeah. So this is regarding the loans and advances. As I said earlier in the notes, the details of loans and advances we used to give as a part of our related party disclosure, the transaction with the related parties, and as outstanding of the amount with the related party due to or due from. Now, whenever the company has provided any loan advances to any of the other entity, they need to segregate the advances into two classes, and the audit need to comment what is the amount outstanding at the balance sheet date with respect of such loans or advances and guarantees given by the company to its subsidiary, joint venture associates, and to other parties other than the subsidiary, joint venture associate. This will give a complete picture of the total loans or advances. As we have discussed earlier, the company need to give what is the amount given to KMP, etc., which is not as per the without any stipulations to repayment or demand loan. But here the total loans are given to related parties need to be given along with the amount paid to outsiders. So the readers will know what is the cash flow of the company and how it has been utilized. If it is diverse only to the related parties, then they can see what is the total amount given to the related parties and what is the total amount given to outsiders. This is a new change applicable for all the companies this year. But this is not applicable for the companies whose principal business is to give loans. There may be companies who would have been classified as NBFC activities. They may be giving funds to sister concerns. May not be a real NBFC, but it may be there are different classifications of NBFC which we will be touching up later. Those cases, it is not required. Only for those companies which are not NBFC, then they need to give the details in the part of financial. The audit need to comment on this. Next one, please.
Yeah, so this particular clause talks of loans or advances in the nature of loans, which actually fall due in the current year, that is in the year under which the audit is being carried out. And if it is falling due, but if there is a renewal or an extension, or if there is a fresh loan issued to repay all the old dues, in those cases, reporting is required. This is also called as evergreening of loans, though it is not defined anywhere. It is basically to kind of keep postponing the repayment, and as and when it falls due, you either renew the loan or extend the loan terms, or you issue a fresh loan to kind of pay off the old loans. So all such circumstances, we need to specify the aggregate amount of such amounts which are actually due, which are renewed, extended, and so on. At the same time, the percentage to the total amount of loans granted also needs to be disclosed. So this is again a new requirement which needs to be reported. Moving on to the next slide. Next slide, please. Yeah. So on the undisclosed income part, we did discuss. The only thing is, yes, so anything that is not disclosed as part of the books of accounts in the previous years, but now surrendered or disclosed, will have to be reported also. As an auditor, we also need to see what is the implications and accordingly report on the CARO, which you have discussed at length in the previous slides. The other part is clause 9 on the repayment of loan. If there is a default in the repayment of loans, be it principal or interest or whatever, the same needs to be reported. Until last year, it was only with respect to banks and financial institutions, but now going forward, it would be for any lender. So any lender, any borrowing, if there is any default, the same has to be reported. The amount of default and the details have to be given in a format as prescribed by the CARO. So this is again a reporting point which we need to take note of. Moving on to the next slide. This is something internal audit which was actually there in the previous versions of the CARO prior to 2016. It was removed in the CARO 2016 version. Now it has again made its entry back into CARO. So as auditors, again, maybe the need for bringing this clause back was to kind of bring into focus the internal audit requirement and the findings of the internal auditors. Basically, somewhere the regulator felt that the internal auditors' findings were not brought to light, and the users were not made known the facts or the particular issues that were raised by the internal auditors. So what the CARO actually says is that first, comment if the company has an adequate internal audit system commensurate to its size and nature of the business. That is one. The second most important point is whether the reports of the internal auditors were actually considered by the statutory auditor, and what were the key findings, how was it handled, and so on. So for all of this to happen, typically, practically, what we actually see is when the statutory audit is being done, the internal auditor might have done only the first half of the internal audit. The second half would be still pending, and the company would say that this is still in progress. We can close this, and parallelly, the internal auditor would do. But I think going by this particular key change, what the statutory auditor will have to do now, and also with the company, is that they will have to talk to the internal auditor, fix up the schedule for the internal audit, and ensure that even before the financials are signed off, the final internal audit reports are shared. And it is not just that the executive summary or only the key issues are brought to the attention of the statutory auditor. The detailed internal audit report and findings will have to be provided to the statutory auditor, and he would also have to discuss what is expected out of the statutory auditors. So thus these observations will have to be discussed with the management and also the internal auditor, and accordingly it is possible that the statutory auditor may have to modify his nature, timing, and extent of the audit procedures. So this is again a very important amendment, and I think it's a welcome move as well. Yeah, moving on to the next slide.
So this is regarding the changes made as far as NBFC is concerned. As you are aware, till date we used to comment on whether the company is required to be registered under section 45(1)(c) of the RBI Act. That is only requirement. Now the reporting requirement has been enhanced. In addition to the existing command, the auditor need to comment whether the company has conducted any non-banking financial activity, housing financial activities, without a valid certificate of registration from the Reserve Bank of India. In case, the audit need to comment. Further, the next question is whether the company is a core investment company as defined in regulation. If so, whether it continues to fulfill the criteria or as a core investment company, and in case the company is an exempt or unregistered core investment, because there are certain clarification. I'm not going into detail of those reporting, which will take time. So if so, whether the company continue to fulfill the conditions. And the last one is, if the company, that is a group, if it is a company, the holding company, and it is a form part of group, has more than one CIC, core investment company, as part of its group, then they need to indicate the number of CICs in the group. Normally it will happen. Most of the companies who are engaged in finance business, they will have a different core investment companies in the umbrella. So in that case, we need to comment on this. The next slide, please. This is we discussed, as we are aware, we are informed about the reporting requirements for ratios. Various ratios need to be given. The auditor now, as a part of his reporting requirement, need to review those financial ratios. They need to see the aging analysis of the trade receivables, expiry date of relation of financial assets, and payment of financial liabilities, and other accompanying statements in the financial statement. And the audit knowledge of the board of directors and management plan, because they will be part of board meetings, audit committee meetings, they will be for reviewing the board minutes, etc. So if they have any information, they need to confirm whether there is no material uncertainty exists on the date of the balance sheet, and the company is capable of meeting all its liabilities existing as of the balance sheet date, as and when it falls due within a period of 1 year. It is just to confirm that the company is strong enough to repay all the liabilities within a span of 1 year, and it can continue as a going concern. This is one additional requirement on the part of the auditor. He has to do based on the details provided in the financial statement itself. So with this, we have completed all the important changes what we thought to be shared with the audience. Next slide, please.
I think we can run the poll now, and it's more of a survey which we would want to conduct. Sana, if you could please run the poll. So the first question is, how prepared are you? I think now that we've understood the seriousness and the magnanimity of the disclosure requirement, how prepared are you to comply with these additional disclosures? Are you really prepared, not prepared at all, reasonably prepared, well prepared, or you have no concerns, which means you have all your systems and your teams in place, and you can manage this? So I'm sure the level of disclosures and the reporting requirements would vary from each company to company. So I think, but we still wanted to understand from you as to how you take this, and what is your opinion on this entire new set of disclosure requirements. Okay, so we have, it's very heartening to see that at least 65% saying that they are reasonably prepared, which is good. 15% saying well, which means almost 80% of the audience say that they are kind of on the track, which is good to see. And 5% again saying that they don't have any concerns. The 15% saying that not prepared at all. I think it's the right time now. And actually, in fact, as you're all aware, the previous year competitors also needs to be prepared. So I think the compilation of the information should actually begin right now. So you can't wait until the end of the next year. So I think it's the right time to get going. So moving on to the next poll question. Do you agree that financial reporting after these amendments would take longer than it does right now? So which means the entire financial statement closure process, the efforts to get the first set of financials which you give it to your auditors, do you think it is going to take significant time, or the efforts are not going to be significantly high? It's more or less the same as what it used to be earlier? I think the majority of the audience does agree to the fact that it would definitely take much longer than what it used to be earlier. So, which is actually the fact, and the minority portion who say no, good that you guys feel that it's not going to take much time. But yeah, I mean, according to us, I think even we feel that definitely there's going to be a lot of time and efforts that one is going to spend on preparing these financial statements, and the entire financial statement closure process is going to be much more significant and time consuming than what it used to be earlier. Okay, moving on to the last, the next poll question. Rate in the order of severity, to be rated in the order of priority first, obviously. So, which according to you would be the most severe one, or the one which is of more relevance, or which you feel is too harsh, or which is more applicable to you? First one being the disclosure with respect to receivables, reasoning for variance in the ratios, undisclosed income, and 4 would be disclosures related to capital work in progress and intangible assets under development. These are some of the key changes and the ones which would actually impact a lot of companies. So we chose these 4. Possible that some of you may not be impacted by a couple of these disclosures, but still we would want to understand how you see these disclosures. Okay. Okay. So absolutely, I think pretty much in the right direction. I think reasoning for variance, I'm sure, is going to severely impact, and if there are huge variances year on year, then I think that's a cause of concern, and we definitely need to give explanations and justifications for the variance. And second comes the disclosure of receivables. Yes, receivable balance is also, until last it was just 6 months and more than 6 months, but now the long laundry list of aging bucket, and then besides that you also need to give disputed, undisputed, and so on. And next comes disclosure with respect to capital work in progress, yes, and undisclosed income. Yeah, not many companies would be affected by this undisclosed income. I think it would be only a minority portion, very insignificant rather. Okay, right. We'll move on to the next one, or that is it. Yeah. So the last one. So, what is your opinion on the new reporting standards on RO? Is it a welcome change? Difficult to comply? Not yet ascertained. I mean, though pretty much most of the provisions are already appearing in your Schedule 3 disclosures, but still there's going to be parallel reporting, and definitely there will be instances where you, as a company and as an auditor, there could be differences, and you have to state something. The auditor may have a difference of opinion. I'm sure that those kind of scenarios are going to come. So according to you, what is your take? Is this a welcome change? Do you think these stringent reporting requirements are required? Is it difficult to comply, or not sure, not yet ascertained? Okay. I'll be happy to see majority saying welcome, yes. So very, very heartening to see again that majority of the audience feel that this is a welcome change. Absolutely, even as auditors, we too are of the same opinion, and this definitely is a welcome change. And it's high time that we have more transparent reporting. And difficult to comply, 15% say, and not yet ascertained, 21%. Okay, good. Thank you so much for taking part in this poll and giving us your sharing your thoughts. Just to summarize, I think obviously and we all have gone through the last 45 minutes, 50 minutes of this presentation, and we understand. First of all, the intent of the law is transparency in the reporting. So that's the main intent. That's the reason there's been a sea change in the disclosures and the reporting requirements. Another thing that we all are now aware of is that the responsibility of the management is going to be enormous. because the disclosure requirements that are there are huge. At the same time, we feel that it is the need of the hour. Definitely such stringent reporting, disclosures and audit reporting is definitely required, and it is very much need of the hour. And the preparation time and what we also got to know from the survey is that definitely there's going to be a lot of time and efforts, both from the company side to have the financial statements prepared and also from the auditor's side to carry out the audit is definitely going to increase. So some of the key takeaways from this session would be that start preparing for your comparative information for the year 2022. That is 2021 related information. You will have to start. Most of you would have got your audits completed or on the verge of completion. So it is a right time to actually have maybe do a dry run or have a draft set of financial statements with all these disclosures. Keep them ready and see how to what extent you're able to comply this. If you have any challenges in terms of the systems or any of accessing any of the information, I think you have ample time to keep them ready. And all of these enhanced disclosures are applicable to IGAAP and Ind AS, as you're aware. There is a possibility that you may have to change or assess your system requirements. It could be your internal controls, it could be your IT infrastructure to be able to generate all these information that you require for disclosure purposes. This is the right time to actually do that as well. And the last thing is, yes, enhanced auditors reporting requirements. Yes, auditors' responsibilities widened. The scope is much more now. It's not what it used to be earlier. So a lot more things to actually look at and question and report on. So with this, we would like to thank myself and Ramaswamy. Would like to take this opportunity to thank all the participants for your patient hearing, and also IJCC for the opportunity to address this wonderful forum and give some highlights on the key changes in the amendment to Schedule 3 as well as the CARO 2020. Thank you once again.
We have received some questions, Vinay, so we'll take it over. Yeah. The first question is how the key changes in CARO 2020 and Schedule 3 of Companies Act impact the financial of real estate sector, hospitality industry, and restaurant chains.
Yeah.
Can you just revert to this?
Sure. I think this is pretty much, this is industry agnostic. It is pretty much the same for all the industries. There is no differentiation here. Whatever is applicable to you, whatever is relevant to you, you disclose at the same time. Whatever is relevant to you at the same time as auditors, whatever is relevant to you as a company, the auditors would respond to it. And it's not that industry-specific disclosures or industry-specific reporting is not there. It is pretty much common and neutral for all. So there is nothing specific for any industry. It is common, and all industries would equally be, I would say, impacted. Even if it's the real estate sector or the hospitality or healthcare or whatever it is, all of them would have most of these clauses applicable for them, and they will have to disclose all these information. Pretty much general. Okay.
Fine. The next question is regarding the age-wise breakup on the receivables should be shown as net of provision or gross receivables. Actually, normally in the old regime, we used to give what is the total outstanding for more than 6 months, less than 6 months, and whether it is doubtful or good. Then we will show for doubtful assets, we will say less provisions. So normally the data has to be shown, the restated will be shown at gross amount, and we have to show the separate line item as less provisions. Now we are giving aging wise classification, less than 6 months, 1 to 6 months to 1 year, 1 to 2, like that. Under that, we have to give a separate item of this classification. What is the provision made to get so that the readers will get a better understanding. Normally for Ind AS company, they are following that, so there is no change for them. They are giving only the tabulation now. For IGAAP company, this is a new requirement. The next question is whether we have any changes in the statement of profit and loss. The barring a few cosmetic changes, as I said earlier, that they change the name of total revenue to total turnover. They made some cosmetic corrections wherever there is a word revenue is used, they made it as turnover, like that. Barring that, there is no major change. Only thing is the rounding of difference. For IGAAP company division 1, now rounding is mandatory. Previously it was optional. They may follow. Now they made the word as shall. So it is compulsory for all the companies to prepare the financial statement rounded up to the hundreds or thousands as they wish. But once you decide to round up a particular decimal, then you need to follow it consistently for the entire financial statements, balance sheet, P&L, notes, or other additional disclosure requirement, whether it's as required under the various statutes or as per the accounting standard. You need to have the same rounding off. You can't have a different rounding off for different presentation in the financial statement. But this rounding off is mandatory only for that year. Subsequently, we can change as we wish. The third question is, ratios are applicable for all companies, including private companies. Yes, it is applicable for all companies. There is no bifurcation or any monetary limit, and it's applicable for all companies. In the income disclosures, will the secondary adjustment required by transfer pricing to be disclosed? Now, just to give an idea about what is secondary adjustment for those persons who are not involved in transfer pricing, maybe all the participants are having international tie-up, definitely there will be transfer pricing issues. Secondary adjustment, nothing but whenever there is during assessment, the TP officers make some additions by way of the arm's length, and that amount has been brought into India as per the provisions of the Income Tax Act. If that amount is not brought in, the company need to pay interest also. The question is whether these type of additions also will be classified as undisclosed income. Normally it cannot be. Undisclosed is not, that is not brought. This is because of the judgmental factor. I am saying that my selling price is 100 rupees, but the officer says I comparing with other companies in India who is doing in the similar line of business, saying that it's 105. He is adding 5 rupees, whatever maybe. I am giving only for better understanding. So that is not, it is undisclosed income. The last question is, can we get a copy of the presentation as I join later? Yes, definitely. We'll be sharing this presentation with the chamber. Definitely, they will be sharing with all the participants or those things. The next one is, are the Schedule 3 changes applicable to quarterly reporting? Quarterly reporting, as I said, there is no much changes in the P&L. So definitely for June and December quarter will not have any bearing, except the change in the nomenclature turnover. But for September and March is always on well. September quarter, halfly, we will be giving balance sheet. Wherever there is a made changes in the main balance sheet, I don't think there is any major change except the PPE. Already we have started following based on the accounting standards. There is no much change. Caro is applicable for consolidated in case subsidiary or associate companies can any adverse comments in Caro. I think you missed this point. I'm not clear about the question.
Basically, I think the participant is asking if in the consolidated financial statements, if whether Caro is applicable for the consolidated financial statements in case subsidiary or associate companies have any adverse comment in the Caro. So when the auditor is issuing a report for the consolidated financial statements, should he consider the adverse or comments that are given in the auditor in the standalone financial statements?
Yeah.
So there is no Caro reporting requirement, but if for the consolidated financials as such, but
bearing on the total consolidated, definitely auditor need to comment on that also.
Yes. The last one, we just finish this with this last question. How to disclose the differences in the books of accounts and monthly and quarterly stock statements? What are the repercussions of the same? I think before you close your books, before you submit your returns to your bankers, be thorough. Ensure that your books are final. You don't ensure they pass. Ensure that you don't pass any more entries. Have proper controls in place. Get it verified maybe by an external consultant, and have stringent systems in your control also to ensure that no passing of entries or adjustments are allowed. With this, I think most of your problems would get resolved.
Yes.
I think we've answered most of the questions. Yeah.
So nothing pending. We covered all the questions. So over to
Sana.
Mira or Sana. Any further questions you can raise? Otherwise, go over to you.
No, that's about it. For the rest of the questions that we were not able to answer to, we'll share the questions with you over email and you can then get back to them. Honey, can you please proceed with the vote of thanks?
Yeah. Thank you. Hello, everyone. On behalf of the Indo-German Chamber of Commerce, we would like to thank our knowledge partner, ASA Associates, for organizing such a beneficial session on key changes in Caro 2020 in Schedule 3 to the Companies Act. We would like to thank our team of experts from ASA, Mr. Vinay and Mr. Ramaswamy, for having put forth such enhanced disclosures and reports on the information available on the subject with such clarity. I am confident that this will be of great value and help in better decision making. So thank you once again. In addition, we also convey a big thank you to our wonderful guests for having taken out your valuable time and being part of today's session. I'm sure many of you would have definitely benefited from the plethora of information given by our panelists on the subject. Moving further, I would like to thank our team from the events department, Sana, Monaz, Nikhil and Samiha, for having diligently worked in putting this webinar together. Lastly, a very special thanks to our regional director, Ms. Meera Dalvi Sani, who very graciously agreed, despite a busy schedule, to give the opening address for today's session. Dear audience, please note a recorded link along with the presentation of today's session will be shared with you in 2 to 3 working days. Please do share your valuable feedback. Also do visit our website to know more about our upcoming webinars, and we hope to have your presence and participation for a future events with the same enthusiasm as always. So thank you until next time. Stay safe and stay well. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Thanks for
Thank you all.
watching.